Today's guest is Timothy Hogan, Grandmaster of the Knights Templar, who are the guardians of some of the world's most secret knowledge and artifacts, including the supposed holders of the sacred Holy Grail. Connections to Freemasons, Rosicrucianism, and several of the world's most powerful and influential men. Did you think the Templars were wiped out after the Crusades? Wrong. They continue to be influential to this very day, and we are going to get into their secret history as well as how you can practice and utilize some of their knowledge yourself. Enjoy a banger podcast, my friends. Check out thewayofwilljohn.com for exclusive info and to sign up for our newsletter and manifestation masterclass. Leave us a like, comment, and let us know who you'd like to see next. We will catch you after the jump. Peace.
Way of Will John.
Timothy Hogan, sir. It is a pleasure. What's going on?
I'm happy to be here with you. It's a good day here in Colorado, and it's great being able to talk with you on the other side of the world.
Yes. And it's over here where we will kind of get started. I mean, there is no real point for me to try and figure out where to start our conversation. So because of that, we're going to do a little winding road on this. I know we'll come back to kind of the base of the Templars and what's going on, and I've seen a lot of your interviews. So I wanted to dive straight into something that is just... I keep seeing this theme throughout very, very, very few, let's say, orders and systems and organizations. So let me explain this to you.
Yep.
We had a guest on. His name was Grandmaster Wolf. He, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he is, I believe, from Australia or New Zealand. I believe Australia. Just an absolutely unbelievable origin story. Ends up at an ancient mystery school in China or Tibet, and has some just otherworldly experiences. Then I start, and I'll come back to that. Now, and then there's an interesting character in the world of conspiracy named Alex Jones. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that name.
Sure.
And then I was looking, just as the Templars, I have a book on the Templars that I haven't started reading, which I'm actually not sure if I will, because I don't know if they'll touch on the things that I've seen you. They kind of do the surface Templar
Right.
thing and not the thing behind. Now, what do all these people have in common? Well, they all describe this practice of supposed stopping the body in order to go out of the body to a certain sense and recover knowledge, experiences, and things like this. All three of them have stories of organizations doing this, or even Grandmaster Wolf, who did it himself.
Sure.
And so I'm just trying to collect a bit of knowledge myself to understand, where is this practice coming from, and is there any basis of truth that the Templars may have had some sort of knowledge or understanding of being able to do this? One of the most important things that I have learned interviewing all of these high-performance leaders is that clarity of mind is crucial to your success. And what good is clarity of mind without clarity of sound? Which is why today's podcast is sponsored by Rode. We, across 𝗪𝗟𝗡, use exclusively Rode audio equipment in order to do all of our stuff. If you are an influencer, if you're just a person out there trying to make some good content for your stuff at home, wherever it is, Rode is by far the best audio partner we have ever had. We have been using their stuff for almost 5 years now. Has never let us down. Truly incredible company, especially with all of the other affordable things that you guys can get from them. Check out the link right down below and enjoy the rest of this podcast.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Astral travel, leaving the body, is definitely a part of the teachings within the Templar order. It's kind of... we kind of gradually work our way up to it, with the things that we teach. But, it is a fundamental part, and and even I'll say that in one of our main initiations that we do, if it's done correctly, it can cause that state to happen, where the person who's being initiated will have an out-of-body experience. And the value of that is, once they have that experience, then from that moment forward, there's no longer a fear of death, right? Which then just opens up your possibility of what you can accomplish in this world, because you're not going to be afraid of, a lot of the things that most people are afraid of. I mean, because worst case scenario, you die, but you you live on. There's a part of you that exists beyond just the physical body. And I know there's Tibetan practices that do that. There's Aboriginal practices that do it. But certainly it is a fundamental part of the Templar tradition as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I the thing just seems very fascinating. Your mind kind of spins for what it could do, what if an organization had that understanding, right? And I mean, speaking just of the history, go ahead if you wanted to add.
Well, I was gonna say, it's funny when you leave your body, it's almost like a dream state in a way. I mean, you're out of your body, you're seeing things, but it's almost like you're dreaming. And we try to do exercises in our temples so that people can prove to themselves that they're actually out of their body, because everybody always has that doubting Thomas within them, right? I mean, and it can happen even when you leave your body, because you leave your body, you see these things, you come back, and then there's a part of you that's like, well, did that really happen, or did I just make that up in my head? Is that real? And there's another part of it too, is usually early on, if you're just trying to do it intentionally for the first time, there is a feeling almost like you're dying right before you leave your body too, and it's because the last time you probably consciously left your body was when you died, your last life, so there's still that, and you have to get past that fear, but then once you get past that fear, you're able to break out and then go wherever, for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I rarely have the opportunity to discuss my own experiences. I was having out-of-body experiences before I knew what they were. So I was in my mid-teens, and the best way I could describe them, mid-teens and early 20s, and I still had no idea what they were. I didn't know what they were until I was 28.
Wow.
I had to Google. I was like, so you mean this is real? Like other people have this? I had no idea. It never occurred to me.
Yeah.
I never, and so I described it to people when I was popping out, when I had no idea that it seemed like I was moving in a space that was not left, right, up, or down. Like it was somewhere I was going. I wasn't out of my body yet, but it was moving there. And then it would start to happen. And then, long story short, I discovered Robert Monroe and guys like Robert Bruce, who wrote Astral Dynamics, and I took it seriously with the attitude of an athlete. And here I am with the full books of experiences. So
that's great.
Wild.
Yeah, there's a lot of oftentimes people, even when they're children and they're going into adolescence, it's not uncommon for them to have some out of body experiences while they're dreaming, or like when they're falling asleep or when they're waking up. They don't necessarily realize that's what it is, but that feeling when you're woken up suddenly and you're feeling like you're falling into your body, it's because you are falling into your body. Your astral body is just getting back into the physical, meshing with it. Yeah, so a lot of people have that feeling.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm curious also, just because of now the way that the world is, and it seems like that we have a whole host of humans waking up to things and let's say experiences and things that are outside of the norm.
Yeah.
The structure of the Templars also amazes me. So could we now rewind once again and just I had no idea that the Templars had any origins in Portugal.
Oh, sure.
Could you give us the whole just maybe a synopsis of how we get to there and what that looks like now?
Yeah, so originally Portugal was founded as a Templar state. For a long time, the order wanted to create a state where people could have the freedoms to, freedom to worship as they chose, freedom of assembly, freedom of, all the freedoms that we appreciate now for the most part in the modern world. But for a long time, that just didn't exist. I mean, if you belonged to a kingdom, you were the property of that kingdom. You weren't allowed to leave it unless the king said you could, and you certainly didn't have any freedoms. The between the monarch and the church, they pretty much controlled everything. So the Templars wanted to create a free state, and they tried it a number of different places. First, they tried to do it in Jerusalem. That wasn't going to work out. Then they tried to do it in France. It wasn't really working out so well there. They had a little bit of freedom in Scotland, just because William the Bruce, Robert the Bruce, had been excommunicated from the church, and so he wasn't, going by what the church wanted people to do anyways. So they were able to hide out up there and kind of help out a little bit. But really, where it started to get established was in Portugal, and the word Portugal really comes from Port du Grail, the port of the Grail, and it was because this is where Templar activity was happening, and this is where they were bringing things, and this is also where they were leaving to travel over to the New World and of the Americas. And so ultimately, Portugal became its own thing, its own territory, but for a long time it was the place of the Templar order. And in fact, when the Templar order was suppressed in 1307, one of the few places that they were able to go and be able to just continue to exist without being prosecuted and persecuted was Portugal. They just changed their names to the Knights of Christ and kept operating. So Portugal had a very important part in the whole Templar tradition. Now, ultimately, the Templar order ended up going to the Americas and helped to set up, new democracies there, including the United States of America. And it was set up to be a new free Templar state. But and they've been involved in trying to provide those freedoms to the rest of the world ever since, in different capacities. So.
One of the most important things you can do if you're trying to earn more money is learn new skills. Stacking skills is one of the greatest things you can do in order to bring value to yourself and the people around you, especially one like learning a new language. I bet most of you guys had no idea that I could speak 9 languages, and that we have a YouTube channel with almost 100,000 subscribers where I do exclusively just that. And we break down the method for exactly what an idiot guy like me has done in order to do this. It's not complex, it's not complicated, and most of you guys have probably used the traditional method, and the traditional method sucks. That's why you can't speak any Spanish after 4 years of going to high school and taking Spanish week in, week out. If you want to learn to speak a language the fastest, easiest, and most natural way, click the link right down below. Goloremi Languages. We've got the method for you. Check it out. You touched on America, though. Could you? I've not gotten too deep into this. Yeah. What is the story between the Templars actually going over to the Americas? Because that's not currently common knowledge as far as our mainstream story.
Yeah.
Is
well,
what is the,
Yeah, standard history says that America was discovered by Columbus, but that was kind of a, it's a ridiculous thing. That wasn't the case at all. In fact, Columbus, the whole reason why Columbus knew to go to the Americas was because he had gotten hold of some Templar maps after he pulled the Grand Master's daughter out of a convent and married her, and got information about the New World. And then he went to Portugal and said, "Hey, fund me to go to the New World." And they were like, "No thanks. We already know there's land on the other side of the ocean. We're not interested." And so when Portugal wouldn't help him, he went to Spain, who was the enemy of Portugal, and said, "Hey, fund me to go to the other side. Portugal's already on to it." And so, of course, Queen Isabella said sure and funded him. And then when Columbus came over to the New World, he had those red Templar crosses on his sails, but he did that specifically because he knew that the natives would already recognize it, because he knew that the Templars had already been traveling there. So the Templar Order had actually been going over to the Americas as early as the early 1200s, and had been doing travels there, all the way up through, I think some of the last artifacts that were moved over to the New World were in the 1360s. So still almost 130 years before Columbus. So,
yeah.
And in fact, even I should point out, even in Christopher Columbus's diary entries, his ship logs, he writes about how when they had anchored offshore of one of the islands near Cuba, and some of his men had gone onto the island, and they came across a bunch of natives, and they were hanging out with this European dude with a big long beard and wearing a white tunic, and that's in Christopher Columbus's own diary entries. And they got scared, went back to the ship, told Christopher Columbus, "Hey, there's some other people here," and they sent out a search party then to go find them, and they weren't able to find them again. But he wrote about it in his own ship logs, so It just goes to show that, there were people here already, from that were non-natives that had been coming over here. So
Yeah,
yep.
That story continues to be evolving, and the more we pull on that rope, it seems to be more convoluted and more complex than just the guy that came over in 1492, or however else we want to truly put it. The other thing that is fascinating, just utterly fascinating to me, growing up, I went to Catholic school. So Catholic grade school, high school, and ended up going to a Catholic college, a Jesuit college as well. And so I've got at least one question on them a little bit later on. But the Ark of the Covenant, whenever you read about this thing, it is one of the most insane things, and to have some sort of, I remember watching a documentary on an Ethiopian church as well that supposedly had one or has one. I'm not sure. Could you give me the background on that?
In Oxum. Yeah, so there's, at least from a Templar perspective, there are actually multiple Arks of the Covenant. And this is not something that you'll normally hear, but the Ark of the Covenant was basically like a static capacitor, where it would build up static electricity, just based on how it was built and what was put inside of it. It would build up static electricity over, a few hours or even a few days, and then it would discharge it on the top of the ark where the wings were of the winged figures on top of it. And of course, this seemed like magic. in the ancient world, and of course you couldn't touch it directly because it would shock you to death, which is even described in the Bible. It talks about at one point in time the ark was about to fall off of an ox cart, and poor guy went to stabilize it, and when he touched it, it killed him. So it was just that static discharge. But these arks, and I say arks because they were not only in Jerusalem, but they were could be found all throughout Egypt. In fact, all of the major temples of Egypt had one of these arks in them. And to this day, they're still depicted on the temple walls in Egypt. You can go to, whether you go to Temple of Hathor at Dendera, or Abydos, Temple of Seti I, or Temple of Isis at Philae, just to name a few, Temple of Horus at Edfu. All of these major temples had an ark in them, and this is depicted on their temple walls. And what, from a Templar perspective, what we believe they were is they were remnants of a technology, an ancient technology that the Egyptians were preserving. And really what we're talking about, we're going back to the story of Noah and the flood. But we believe that there was just like Plato said, that there was an advanced civilization in antiquity. It got wiped out during the time that Plato said it got wiped out, which was during the Younger Dryas cataclysm, and that there were pockets of survival from that cataclysm, and some of them were preserving these arks, this ark technology. And the Templar Order, over the centuries, has managed to secure 6 of these arks, which we have in a secure location right now. But there were probably as many as 100 arks at one point in time in antiquity, I would believe.
Wow.
I think.
So what was the main purpose?
Some of them
for
have been
these?
melted down for the precious metals, but yeah.
What was the main purpose of the ark? Just to give energy? Did it have some sort of metaphysical power, or is it just simply physical energy?
It had a twofold thing. On the one hand, it broadcasted electricity within a region, certainly within the temples themselves. But there's some speculation that an ark could have even been put in the Great Pyramid, and that the Great Pyramid would just then become this broadcast station to broadcast electricity within a region. And so when the cataclysm happened, that just kind of wiped all that out. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, they were also placed in the sanctum sanctorum of these temples, and you find that being described in the legends of or the stories of King Solomon's temple as well. Well, these temples were built like human bodies in stone. So especially the Egyptian temples, but also you find it in Hindu temples, in the cathedrals of Notre Dame in France, in Germany, but and of course Solomon's temple. But they were built in such a way that the building was reminiscent of the human body. And so where the sanctum sanctorum was at the area of the what we would call the third eye on the human head. And hence, in fact, this is the reason why these are called your temples, right? Because that's where the temple is. But that third eye, which we associate with the pineal gland, is kind of the communication device with God, from a metaphysical standpoint. And so the the ark symbolically represented that because it was the powerhouse in the temple itself. So when that ark was put in the temple, it kind of turned the temple on, so to speak, and
Gotcha.
yeah, made it you know,
Functional.
yeah, it made it functional, and I think probably in the ancient world, uh, just the static discharge from it, and the fact that it would, if you go in the temple and touch a statue or something, it would shock you. That was magic, right? That was that was alive on some level, and so I think that's part of what was going on in the ancient world.
What's also coming to light nowadays from the ancient world is that potentially the use of psychedelics was
Yep.
more prevalent than we may have thought. What
Right.
did the Templars use, have, or was there any predominant drug? Let's say, I guess drug is the wrong word, hallucinogenic perhaps,
Yeah,
that they used?
yeah, they did. The Templar Order, actually, from some of the earliest records, they created a drink known as the Wine of Jerusalem. And what it was it was an aloe wine that was infused with marijuana, with THC,
Okay.
basically, and CBD. And it was kind of like it was given during a communion, right? During the communion ceremony, where and it was deemed to help aid in the aches and pains, that people had. So it helped to ease that, and it did. Most people don't think of marijuana necessarily as a hallucinogen, but in high enough quantities, it definitely can be a hallucinogen. So, so that was one of the things they were looking at. The other thing they were looking at too was there's a plant known as acacia, which grows all over the Middle East, and one of the things that the Templars were engaging in is they had alchemical operations. They were practicing alchemy, or the science of transmuting one thing into something else and making medicines and that type of thing. So, but when they would do their operations on this particular plant, one of the things you can extract from it is dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, which is the definitely a hallucinogen. I mean, that's pretty much the source of hallucinogen stuff. And in fact, when you dream at night, part of that is because DMT is being released from that pineal gland that we were talking about a few minutes ago. But it's also it affects your dreaming, and then actually when people die, there's a huge flush of DMT that's released right before people pass away, and it's a hallucinogen, and but some call it the spirit molecule because it tends to tap into a greater consciousness field, shall we say?
I also I'm a huge reader, and one of the things that I constantly jokingly complain about is the fact that I can't just walk into the Vatican library and just take what I want to read. I don't know what would happen if I tried. But I was, and now I'm not sure where my source for this was coming from, but and it might even have been a podcast that you'd spoken about, but Napoleon, if I remember, was the only other person in history to have possession of the Vatican library. And to have moved it outside of Rome, or sorry, outside of
He did.
Vatican,
Yeah,
let's say.
he moved it outside of Rome into France. Particularly, the records were stored at Saint Sulpice in Paris for a while, and he was specifically looking for Templar-related documents, actually, that the Vatican might have. In fact, Napoleon's entire campaign to Egypt, where he was studying all the temples in Egypt, and he even received an initiation in the Great Pyramid. And but he also stopped at Malta, specifically because when the Templar Order was suppressed in 1307, all of their property was handed over from the Roman Church seized their property and handed it over to the Knights Hospitalier, which was a rival order of the Templars. And later, the Knights Hospitalier changed their name to the Knights of Malta, and hence why their headquarters was at Malta. So that's the other reason why Napoleon went there to Malta to try to get more. He was trying to get information related to the Templars that may have been lost or suppressed. And he was trying to understand what their research was. And obviously the Vatican had a lot of that information. So he brought everything over to Paris for a while, and then he returned it. But Napoleon's personal physician was a man by the name of Bernard Raymond Fabre-Palapprat, and he was the Grand Master of the Templar Order at the time, actually. And so he was working very closely with Napoleon, obviously. So.
Yeah. Wow. There's also, I imagine, relics, and relics have played a huge role throughout history, and there's always a hint that relics hold within them not just the fascination historically, but potentially some power of some
Metaphysical
sort.
power. Yeah.
What could you tell us about what the Templars believe? And even now, I mean, I imagine, if Ark of the Covenants are floating around, and there's got to be some pretty powerful relics. What is there that's out there now?
Well, so relics, from a Templar standpoint, relics are like talismans. They're imbued with power because people believe in them, right? It's the people believing in them that give them the power that they have. And, there's several relics out there. I mean, there's several churches who claim to have different relics. There's been other relics throughout history, like the Spear of Longinus, which was said to be possessed by a number of different world leaders throughout history, including Charlemagne and others, and of course Adolf Hitler was trying to get a hold of it during World War II. And as the story goes, General Patton actually did get a hold of it, and then the United States helped to win the war right after that, and then as soon as he turned that spear over is when General Patton died on his motorcycle accident. So, but as long as you possess the spear, supposedly you're pretty much invincible. So,
where is it now?
That's the story. What's that?
Where is it now?
Oh, it's in the Habsburg Treasure House, supposedly in Vienna. But
Okay.
Some say that's also there's some people that say that's actually a replica that's in the treasure house right now, and that the original was kept by the United States. But I can't confirm or deny that. I mean, I don't know. That's just the story. So, but yeah, the Templars did come across lots of artifacts while they were not only in Jerusalem, but also while they were in Egypt and other places. But, for example, one of the other artifacts that the Templars kind of created was when they were in Egypt. Their main commandery base of operations that they set up was at the Temple of Isis at Philae. And at the Temple of Isis, there's these depictions of the goddess Isis nursing the young Horus, who's sitting on her lap. And there were actually these black basalt statues of this that were there at the Temple of Isis. Well, when the Templars went to help build the Gothic cathedrals of France, they replicated this image and created what were known as the Black Madonnas that are found in the crypts of these cathedrals. And really what they are is they're just a recreation of the black basalt Isis and Horus statues that they found at their headquarters in Egypt. And they just tried to replicate it, and then that became kind of the model for the traditional image of Virgin Mary with baby Jesus, later on. But those Black Madonnas are also viewed by many people to be viewed with metaphysical qualities, and many people go to pray to them, and they even do parades where they hold them, and the whole bit. So that's another type of talisman, that it was created at some point in time to have this special meaning, and is now said to be imbued with all these powers.
And speaking of power, obviously, and powers and talismans and all of these different things, there is something that we have guests come on and discuss, because a lot of people are very successful like yourself and have dug into knowledge for so long. One thing that our society has an obsession with, I would even say, and it's been something that's very curious to me, manifestation and one's ability to manipulate the world through consciousness and through the world around them. Obviously, nothing hit it. This subject didn't hit anything more than its peak, but at the time of The Secret, right? And sure. It entered into the lexicon, So my question becomes, with that knowledge and the knowledge that it's perhaps possible to, manipulate one's future or the future of the collective conscious.
Sure.
What do the Templars do or have, and what do they say, or what do you guys essentially, what's your understanding of that power that humans have?
Well, first of all, that whole way of thinking originally goes back to Hermetic philosophy, and the so-called writings of Hermes that you can find in the Corpus Hermeticum and other texts. But the idea of it was that we are living. Well, first of all, it all goes back to the idea that, and bear with me here a second, we're going to get a little
Sure.
deep.
Please
but,
do.
So it goes back to the idea, if you're the creator, and you're all that is, and there's nothing outside of yourself, it's just you, right? Then the only way that you can create, because there's nothing outside of yourself to create with, so the only way that you could create is within your own mind, right? So following this logic, it means that everything in creation that we see today and we think is solid and real and tangible is actually just consciousness. It's mind stuff. It's all consciousness consciously becoming more conscious. And so as we move about in this conscious field, we can be co-creators in that process, because it's all just mind stuff, and we have a mind ourselves that's connected to that, and so therefore, we can create or manifest anything we want. The challenge with that is, however, that you can get whatever you want but you're also going to get what comes with it, right? So you may want a Ferrari, for example. Okay, so let's say you manifest the Ferrari. Well, now you also have the maintenance bills and the insurance and everything else that goes along with that, that you're going to have to deal with. And God forbid, the car gets a scratch on it or, in an accident.
God.
You're going to have those bills too. So maybe then the Ferrari becomes a burden, at that point. Mm-hmm. So, it just depends on where you're at. But it's all about... that's a kind of a silly example, but we can absolutely, based on this Hermetic idea, we absolutely attract to ourselves the things we need in order to learn the lessons we need to learn this life. And so, because it's all consciousness, consciously becoming more conscious, that's what we're here to do. We're just here to learn and wake up more. And so we will attract to ourselves the things that we need in order to do that. And some of that involves us consciously attracting it to ourselves. But again, whatever comes to you, there's also a lesson that comes with it. And for you to learn. You just may not realize what that is yet. So,
right,
yeah,
which becomes the struggle for some people and everyone, I guess, at the time. Right, it's hard to see, given the complexity of life, why this thing is happening to you now. It's only later on where you go, oh, "Thank God, I got fired."
Yeah.
Otherwise,
yeah, right.
I would. Right, so,
right.
It's fascinating, and I'm curious of a kind of a daily routine. I've never heard of, and this is both. You can probably answer both these questions because it's a follow up to the manifestation, and just having this power within us. What was a daily life like for in the past and during this golden? I'm putting in quotation marks here. This golden period that we know of the Templars, the one that we're all more or less familiar with, and now with regards to maybe a meditation practice, ritual practice. All these cathedrals are built, with the Templars in being involved. What does it look like to wake up in the morning, do some sort of meditation, some sort of practice, some sort of ritual, and go throughout the day? Like, how does that look like? What is it to be a practicing Templar?
Templars have they do regular meditational exercises. They actually every Templar has what's called an oratory, which is like a small altar in their house where they can go. Sometimes it's referred to as a chamber of reflection, but it's a place where they can go and meditate and prepare themselves for the day, visualize what they're going to do, think about how they could be of the best service to humanity, and also just meditate and attune with this greater consciousness that we live in. And the hope is that they become, one of the things, the terms we use is that the Templar becomes what's known as an agent of omniety, or an agent of the universal process that's unfolding. And the way we look at it is from a maybe from a biblical standpoint, is not my will but thine will be done. In other words, we just are an agent in whatever needs to happen in order to bring about the greatest consciousness awakening for everybody around us at any given time. So that's the hope that we can do. And sometimes that means, being available to answer questions to people. Sometimes it means saying nothing and just being of assistance, performing charity anonymously. Sometimes it involves, just being the right person at the right time to help out with something, But it's being conscious of that process as you're moving about in the world. And so that's what we try to be, is as awake as possible, right, and help bring about the greatest awakening as possible.
You've mentioned several times, obviously, the potential of next lives or having had previous lives. How big a role does reincarnation play in the teachings and understandings of the Templars? Because it's not, to my knowledge, well, to my knowledge now, but growing up in Catholic school, there was no talk of, let's say, reincarnation. So where does this fall?
We don't require people to believe in reincarnation in the Templar Order, but I will say that it is a pretty fundamental part of what we teach. We do believe in reincarnation. In fact, you can go back to one of the earliest rules of, or which is kind of like the book of conduct and guide of conduct for the Templar Order, going clear back to the 1200s. And one of the things that the order has always offered is a thing known as the consolamentum. And what this is it's a right that basically, when you receive this right, it ensures that you don't have to reincarnate anymore unless you want to, or unless you feel like you need to, in order to help the world. So that's one of the things that the Templar Order has offered, going all the way back. And we definitely believe in reincarnation. We feel we can back it up with holy texts from many different faiths. And we strive to understand not only who we've been in the past, but we work to try to build a future life for ourselves as well, to do work that may need to happen in the world. So, like, for example, the Grand Commander that was my mentor for a long time was a man by the name of Dr. Onslow Wilson. And he was a wonderful guy, but he before he passed away, he was planning on reincarnating in China his next life, so that he could help out with Chinese-U.S. relations going in the future. So that's kind of the way of think. It's a different way of thinking from how most people think about their journey in their life, but it's very much proactive. It's from a Templar perspective, is understanding not only who we've been, but what work we need to do, not only in this life, but in our next life, in order to advance the process of helping humanity wake up.
So is there an active conscious, not just thought, but practice and attempt to manipulate your future reincarnation, your future lives, let's say, at least from the standpoint of where we are now, through the Templar Order? And is that what is giving the order such staying permanence? If I'm going to draw this, if I'm going to take all this in and say that this is, how it works, it would make sense that you could, start an order thousands, or not necessarily thousands, but, close to 1,000 years ago, roughly, and keep it going.
Once you've been initiated into the order too, that sticks with you, and you're always kind of, it's always there. It's a part of who you are after that. And so if you die and you come back your next life, you're going to be attracted to that again, and you're going to find it out again. And so it's not uncommon for people you've worked with in past lives in that capacity to you run into them again in this life, to do the same work, to continue the same work. And I know that's a strange thing for a lot of people to think about, but we can back it up too from biblical sources. I mean, like a good example. I mean, most people, when they hear being born again in Christianity, they think of something else. But who's to say that wasn't about being born again? Reincarnating. I mean,
Right.
there's a great passage. I can't remember the exact passage in the New Testament where the disciples go to Jesus and they say, "Jesus, Jesus, the people are saying that the prophet Elias has come back." And Jesus says, "Well, he has come back, but the majority of people don't recognize him yet." And it says, "Then the disciples understood he was speaking of John the Baptist." Well, we know who John the Baptist's parents were. So if Elias is coming back as John the Baptist, that means he's reincarnating as John the Baptist. So, it's right there in the Bible. It's just people aren't conditioned to looking at it that way. But from a Templar perspective, yeah, that's very much the way it is. And in fact, oftentimes our leadership within the Templar Order is selected by people who were leaders within the order previously that, we're able to recognize. We have ways of recognizing and welcoming them back and getting them the tools that they need to continue the work. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's if I'm not mistaken, I believe the Dalai Lama is one of those other instances where that is considered to just
Right.
be the case, right? They know how to find the next incarnation, and so it
Yeah, we
continues
do
and
we do a
continues and
similar
continues
thing
and
in the
continues.
Templar Order. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, one of the most interesting things right now is how the word the deep state and the other forces at B have become to be really, really well known. Let's say more
Yeah,
so and more
sure.
talked about than they ever have. And with the knowledge the Templars have, and that you're describing, it's not a far stretch to say that it would be obvious that any sort of intelligence agency that's been around for a while and a host of governments or anyone in power would have similar knowledge. And so, given that the Templars had this interesting relationship with the Church and Rome, and throughout history, what role now does this play? Is there a meshing? Is there tension between, the order and say, I don't know, just choose any three-letter agency from the U.S.? Like, how
Well,
does that work?
it's interesting. I mean, sometimes, we do have members who are involved in some of those three-letter agencies. We also have members who are involved in the leadership in the Roman Church. But in general,
Right.
the order has sought to exist independent of all of that. And we believe that that the Spirit of God is within everybody, and or sometimes we refer to it as the sacred flame is within everybody, and it just gets really buried, and people don't realize it's there. So part of the Templar work is about finding who you really are, what your real connection is with this greater consciousness, and it's, for the most part, three-letter agencies exist as a form of control, to keep people controlled to a particular system. What I was saying is that oftentimes three-letter agencies are they're in the business of control, to try to keep people under control and to keep systems in place that support the the bigger whatever, the country itself, but more importantly the businesses and the power of the country. As Templars, we're not as concerned about that. We're more concerned about control over oneself and being able to harness our greatest potential, and part of that lies in a greater intelligence, which is this universal consciousness, which collective consciousness, which Templars refer to as the Christos, or the Christ. They recognize that that Jesus, for example, was speaking as the Christ, as the universal consciousness. So it wasn't, Christ wasn't his last name. It was that the Christos was the universal consciousness that we can all access, that we are it's inherently within us. We just have to be awakened to it. And in so doing, then that's where real intelligence comes from, because it's universal consciousness. By tapping into that, you can pretty much see or hear or understand anything that you need to. But it's just getting to that point of being able to tap into it.
Right. And I mean, that can take years or sometimes not so long, right? I mean, there are stories of people having, I don't want to necessarily say enlightenment, but at least it can be a life's work, or and if I understand this right, people can reach a certain level and fall off, and go backwards or regress, and so the entire spectrum of how the Templars had come about and continue their work was what fascinated me just in general, to even want to read about it. Not only just the structure, just for how you can manage this. I mean, it's truly an empire of sorts, and one that has to be very careful about who its friends are and how it continues to grow, right? And having to go into hiding so many times throughout history. Which takes us to the one thing that everybody knows we have to touch on, which is the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
And I don't know where. I've avoided looking into this my entire life, truly, because I see so many different ways of going about this. But maybe you can shed some light into what the superficial version is, and then maybe what the true potential nature of it actually is.
Well, most people, when they hear the Holy Grail, they think of the cup of Jesus at the Last Supper. That's usually what they think of. It's a good fitting symbol for it, but really, from a Templar standpoint, what the Grail is it's the connecting point between our individual consciousness and the consciousness of the Creator. Right? It's that meeting point between the two, and in that space is where what we refer to as gnosis can take place, or divine revelatory knowledge. And so this is one of the aspects of it. Some of the other aspects that are associated with the Grail have to do with alchemy. And sometimes the Grail is depicted as an emerald, or an emerald chalice. And this is really alluding to the Hermetic teachings of associated with something known as the Emerald Tablet of Hermes. And what the Emerald Tablet of Hermes talks about is, it says, as above, so below. And it's giving instructions for how to create something known as the Philosopher's Stone. And so the Philosopher's Stone in alchemy is something that raises consciousness, heals the body, and raises consciousness, heals the body, and can transmute base metals into gold, basically. And so this is also one aspect of the Grail, is this Philosopher's Stone, this secret this secret magical item that can bring about good things in your life. So that's one aspect of the Grail as well. Another aspect of the Grail is usually associated with some would say the when it's referred to as the Sangreal, that it has to do with the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. This idea that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married, they had children, and that there was an entire lineage that came out of them. And what was significant about this bloodline had less to do with, it's not like their blood had like some sort of magical quality to it or anything. What it had to do with is a tradition being passed down through the family line of what would be argued the true teachings of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, which is really of a more of a Gnostic type of belief system. When I say Gnostic, the Gnostics believed that anybody through their own efforts could attune with that greater consciousness of God. And you didn't need the intermediary of a priest in order to do it. Right? Well, that's bad business for the Roman Church. But that was the true teachings according to this bloodline, and so they've perpetuated that idea. And the Templars are certainly a part of that. I mean, the Templars have people of all backgrounds, all faiths, all nationalities, all races, but but there is a core belief that anybody through their own effort could attain this divine revelatory knowledge known as gnosis. And this is really what the Grail is about. And the quest for the Grail. Because the quest for the Grail is about finding that element that restores the wasteland. In the Grail legends, everything kind of goes to crap. According to the stories, there's a king, and he gets wounded, and as he gets wounded, the land becomes wounded, because there's this relationship between as within, so without, and only the Grail can heal that. And so that wasteland is both a metaphor for the chaos of our lives and the ruin of our lives when we're not in harmony with the greater consciousness, but it's also it's actually I guess it's not just a metaphor; it's an actual thing too, right? When we're out of line with ourselves, when we're out of balance, we do things in the world that lead to more problems, right? Yeah, I mean, just look at our environmental disasters that we have going on right now. I mean, they come from, nobody's trying to cause environmental disaster, but people aren't awake as to what they're doing. And the result is, that's what happens, and it comes back and hurts us. So it's all about becoming awake, more awake, and understanding our connection with the universe.
And there's it's interesting because I've spent a lot of time reading about secret societies and their roles in history. And one other group definitely comes up at least as much as the Templars, if not more, which is the Freemasons.
Sure.
And I know, I'm not sure necessarily, having never really gone quite too deep in either of the societies or the orders, but is there some overlap between the two? Or is there some sort of connection there? Because that's what I seem to be getting on the outside, but I don't really know.
Yeah, there is, and we can look at it from a historical standpoint. So one of the things that happened is when the Templar order was at its height, and we're talking about in the 1200s of our current era. One of the things that they were responsible for was bringing knowledge over from the Middle East in particular, but also other places like India and Africa, different places they've traveled. And they collected all of the wisdom from all the different groups that they were meeting, and they brought that back to Europe, and they built these Gothic cathedrals, and they tried to preserve the knowledge on these cathedrals. But in order to do that, they had to have a whole group of stonemasons within the Templar order, right? And part of the knowledge that they brought back had to do with sacred geometry, sacred architecture. They had to know metallurgy in order to make the stained glass windows with metallic oxides. So there was an alchemical knowledge there. But ultimately, when the Templar order was suppressed in 1307, when the Pope Clement V and Philip the Fair of France, King Philip the Fair of France, engaged in a secret plot to destroy the Templar order in order to try to steal its riches and that type of thing. The Templar order had to go underground, and one of the best places that they were able to hide was within stonemason guilds, because they had already been building all these cathedrals and these temples all over Europe. So, and back then, one of the values of the stonemason guild is stonemasons were actually allowed to travel between kingdoms, whereas most people weren't allowed to. So this gave the Templar order a perfect cover to be able to hide their membership and to be able to, travel freely throughout the different kingdoms of Europe at the time. Now, what happened then is this operative art of stonemasonry eventually entered by the late 1500s, early 1600s. These operative stonemason guilds began to, especially the ones that had the Templars in them, they were passing on this secret knowledge and these secret philosophies, and they incorporated it into their practice. And so, again, by the late 1500s, early 1600s, these operative stonemason guilds became what were known as speculative Freemasonry, where it was people would join it not because they knew how to build a building, but because they were looking for the philosophical knowledge that had been preserved by the Templars that was being passed down in this new form. And then eventually this became what is known as Freemasonry. And then Freemasonry started adding degrees to it. To this day, most Masonic systems around the world, they all culminate in Knight Templar degrees, because that was the origin of them. So,
Okay.
yeah.
What are the sources that you guys have, and what language are they in? You know, I mean, many old organizations have holy books, or like you might already mentioned the Book of Conduct before, but you know, because not just I imagine if the Templars, you guys would have obviously your own records and your own things, but then you know we talked about the Hermeticum, you know, and we're going to need some very ancient languages here. And I know ancient Greek has played a role. Latin plays a role. What are your sources for all of the Templar knowledge? Where does that really come from?
Well, we look at ancient texts for sure. One of the things that the Templar Order was known for early on was when they went down into the Holy Land, in particular, is they were finding other gospels or other gospels that aren't in the standard Bible. So they were apocryphal texts, and they were Kabbalistic texts that they were finding, you know, that were in Hebrew or Aramaic or sometimes in Greek. As they became exposed to this, they realized that these sacred texts could be interpreted a lot of different ways than just the way the Roman Church was promoting them at the time. And so I think this is part of the reason why the Templar Order was suppressed as well. It's because they were open to other ways of looking at things. I mean, and they had people of other faiths joining the Templar Order. I mean, they had Jews, and they had Muslims, and they had Druze, and they had other forms of Christianity, other Christian forms. I mean, people of the Coptic Church of Ethiopia, the Celtic Church of Ireland and England. They also had Gnostic churches like the Albigensians and others who were all joining the Templar Order, and as a result, they were able to prove that people of different faiths could get together and pray, and they just recognize that they all pray to the same God. They just may have different rituals or ceremonies or whatever, of how they celebrate that. but ultimately, they're all looking at the same mystery, and the Templar Order was always very welcome to that. And sometimes that's put it at odds with established religion, particularly the Roman Church. But to the Templar, the sacred flame, your connection with God is within you always. So it doesn't matter where you go to pray. You could go into a Hindu temple. You could go into a Buddhist temple. You could go into a Taoist temple. It doesn't matter, because your connection with that greater mystery is within you. So you can pray anywhere, and you can celebrate that mystery wherever it manifests. Because every religion was started by somebody who had an experience where they connected with that divine. And so that's Gnosticism. That's the Gnosis. And from a Templar perspective, that should be celebrated. The sacred should be celebrated regardless of its source, wherever it is.
Yeah, yeah. I've always been drawn towards Gnosticism. Just maybe perhaps a personality trait where I've just, as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, my own search and my own internal search, and I enjoyed that. I think one becomes better for it when it's not fed up to them in a silver platter.
Right.
I think and not having an intermediary, like you said, bad for business, for the Catholic Church, good for the individual as
Right.
they become a better person, understand more, can then obviously through experience teach someone else.
Right.
If you have time for it, I have two more questions.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The first of these is, what does the recruitment look like now for Templars? How does that work? There's no, I can't imagine an open tryout, with guys all dressed in white robes and red crosses competing in a football game.
No.
And just as a follow up to that, which is not my last question though, is the list of Templars secret? Are the members entirely unknown, or are there some aware and out and some not? How does that work?
Yeah,
What does that look
we
like?
tend to, if someone wants to come out and identify themselves as a Templar, they're welcome to. But otherwise, we keep it secret. We keep their membership secret because it's their own journey, and it's not really our place to go tell the world, hey, so and so's a Templar. I mean, oftentimes after someone passes away, it comes out like, oh yeah, they were a part of this. But
I see.
But we tend to keep it secret unless someone outs themselves. And we do have membership in all walks of life. Everything from athletes to music producers to politicians to movie makers to you name it, artists. The list goes on and on. But they're all, the one thing that everybody has in common is they're all striving to better themselves, to become fully awake to who they really are, and to help to wake up the rest of the world and make the world a better place if they can. So, Templars,
That's great.
Templars believe in absolute freedom, and that they believe that people have God-given rights, to be able to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom to protect yourself, all the things that are inscribed in the United States Bill of Rights are fundamental ideas to Templars, and that we believe that people need this freedom because that's the only way you learn, right? If someone's just telling you how to think, you're not really learning anything. You're just a parrot, you're just repeating what someone else has told you to think. I mean, you haven't really learned anything. So we need the freedom to do that. And as far as, we don't really recruit membership, but we do exist in different forms around the world. And we have, usually when somebody is drawn to this Templar work, they find us, and we get them going, with what they need to. We do have pre-study bodies, for example, the Templar Collegia, which is, if you go to www.templarcollegia.org, you can sign up for a pre-study body, to start the Templar work. And that is open to men and women. And and it's, people who do that are They're given study materials. They're given the ability to attend meetings with other Templars, whether in person or even virtually. And we do have gatherings, once a year, worldwide gatherings, where Templars from around the world come and can meet each other. Where we do lectures, and we do seminars, demonstrations, and we perform in our initiation ceremonies during those times. So, yeah, so it's exciting stuff.
Complex.
Yeah.
And as a last question, I spoke to a man named Andrew Bustamante, who is a former CIA operative, and jokingly, I asked him about the secrets that he has to, because he mentioned, what the CIA does is not necessarily a secret.
Right.
The operatives, the things, the way, their methods are not secret. What is secret is what they find out using their tactics
Sure.
and strategies and et cetera. And so my question to you is, and sorry, he finished up that his monologue by saying the things that he had become privy to would shock you, would turn your world upside down.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the Templars hold a similar set of knowledge that would turn someone's head upside down if they were to, catch the worldview that you guys might have?
Definitely. Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, I tell people all the time, I'll take them to see certain things or to experience certain things, and you're never the same person afterwards as you were when you first went into it.
Yeah.
And we try to get people as prepared as possible, but it's kind of like, waking up to the Matrix, and realizing you're living in the Matrix, and that everybody's hopelessly asleep, and you're finding yourself awake, and you need to help wake up other people, and it's and some of that waking involves an understanding of how the world really works, but also understanding aspects of history that is maybe largely suppressed, and then also waking up to our own powers. I mean, first time you ever consciously astrally project, that's a big wake-up call,
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
as one example of many. So, yeah.
Sure. Listen, Tim, it's been a pleasure. This is food for thought. I know for the people out there that are, just getting into this is something they're probably going to want to listen to a few times and go dig deeper. So you already mentioned a website, and obviously we'll link to anything that you are,
Sure.
are wanting to put out there, but where else would anybody, if they're more interested, would you want to send them to?
I do have a book called The Way of the Templar, and it's
Okay.
and it for anyone who's interested in looking into this history, maybe some of the secret history of the Templar Order and what some of the teachings and intentions are behind the Templar Order. It's a good start. It's just called The Way of the Templar, and you can get it through any bookseller. So,
Sure. Awesome.
yeah.
We will link to all of that, and once again, looking forward to hopefully being able to continue this conversation. Maybe in a month or two, it would be awesome.
Yeah,
But
I'd
for now,
love to come back. We could discuss a lot more.
oh yeah. I mean, it's a never-ending combo.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate it, and we'll speak soon.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course.